You're listening to Innovate 5, the show that highlights innovation and celebrates the passion for the future. Innovate 5, the power of STEAM. Join Carl Wolfenden as he has conversations with amazing innovators from around the world. The guests and topics on the show are not always affiliated with Innovate 5, and any comments are the opinions of the individuals, and we strongly advise before making any decisions to research the options available.
Good morning, and welcome to Innovate 5, on Business Class News. We've been having these fantastic conversations over the past, few weeks. And, I must admit, every week when I know it's going to be my next guest, which is Michael Steiner from Best Robotics, is coming on the show, I get really excited because I know we're going to have a really, really good conversation. As I just gave it away, haven't I? That was Michael. You're the guest this morning on the show. How are you? It's been a while.
I'm great, like everybody else, praying that more people will do well, will vaccinate, if I may, will not get infected, that COVID will leave us soon. So I'm sure, like many of our viewers and listeners, I'm in the praying place and hoping that people will do well.
And I'm with you. I mean, it's kind of scary because I think complacency sometimes sets in. Self-preservation needs to be a forefront of mind and be aware of around us, of people that we're going to be contacting. So I'm with you. So I'll join you in prayer. So, one of the things that we've been talking about over the past a few weeks on the you've become a regular contributor, and as I said, I really get excited about having these chats with you because they're informative and educational for sure. One of the things that we wanted to sort of look at, and we talked about off mic after the last segment, that communication is a very, very important part of an organizational success, and people want to sort of grow, etc. And we've been talking about the future of the workforce, and the thing that worries me and has worried me, and I've told you this, and I know you have your opinions on it, is that communication isn't taken as seriously these days. I mean, we're texting, we're doing, we want instant gratification, we want an instant reply. I always remember a story, and this is a story now. I love telling these stories, don't I? The story of a guy said technology is supposed to enhance things. So in the old days, we used to write a letter, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and then send it off. It'd take 2-3 days. We'd then get a reply, either via phone or a letter back. And now we send an email, and if we're not getting an answer within 30 seconds, we think, how rude is it that they've not come back and answered my email? It's that's the sort of mentality that I think we've got to sort of get away from and realize that communication isn't these instant little blips. It's about giving detail. It's about giving education. It's about really putting it out there. So enough of me talking. I mean, you talk about, fit, fast, and flat, and the organizations have this desire to grow and excel in their own sector. What are the 3 common approaches in your mind to communication?
So I'm going to answer you in a second, but you just inspired me into something which I wasn't going to include, but I think it will kick the conversation into something that nobody expects. Few years ago, and I think this is what gets these conversations to be unexpected, disruptive, and unusual, this chinwag, which is as much you and partially only me.
Oh, no. I'm not going to have that. It's you. And then I'm just an observer.
No, I think I am the one who observes. Few years ago, I think 5 weeks before President Obama's first election, we summoned a group of people who specialize in communication. I emphasize communication, into a large conference room of Buchanan Ingersoll law firm. And we did a streaming conference that analyzes the campaign communication. These were people from different parts of the country, and we tried to do something which one shouldn't do: predict who will win based on communication only. We are talking about communication. And across the board, people across the country said, if we evaluate the communication skills alone, he wasn't president yet, the candidate Barack Obama is going to sail through based on his campaign communication skills. The reason is, and the professionals, this was recorded, they scored him as high as can be. What we are talking about today is really trying to understand whether this is really just a mean buffer, technology, or way more than just a mean. The example that you inspired me into at the beginning of this somewhat disruptive conversation, which at best we invest so much more into just a mean, in what President Obama did more than once, hints already that this is probably not just some buffer, but something significantly more. So to answer your question, before you turn pale from the example I used at the beginning of our conversation, is that there are 3 methodologies that are used. One is that organizations, corporations encourage a conversation about communication. Talk about it. What would enhance our internal communication? The second one, commonly used, is to bring in a platform, software, hardware, anything that would encourage people and enable them, empower them to communicate better. And the harder one, which is what we do at best, is to keep training people, to bring them again and again and again into the sophistication of communication and to the multifaceted that communication really is, because it isn't one that fits all. It has so many faces. And I'm already hinting again, and the examples we will give today will demonstrate why, to my mind, it isn't just talking about it, why a software or a hardware will not resolve it, why people need to be trained in it to improve.
I mean, one of the things that I think we have when we have these conversations, like you said, is they're thought provokers. I mean, it really talks about, it instills in me questions of you. And one of the questions that I have is, how do you achieve, excellence in communications? And have you got an example, for example?
I will, and I'm going to give you a few examples throughout the rest of the conversation. But before I do that, I want to give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background and data, if you will. So one, just to support this notion that communication is a bigger thing than we realize or we want to give credit. It isn't just something that few are good at. So we say journalists are good at it, people at Netflix or Amazon or Carl Wolfenden is excellent at it. It's just, or Larry King was amazing at it. It's just not, it's not enough. It doesn't cut it there. We have to realize that it's more than that. So in a survey that McKinsey did recently, what they did is they surveyed leaders that are executives in industry and HR leaders globally, not just here in the US. And what they discovered that the top 3 skills that these 2 groups rank as essentials include communication. Had you asked me if communication would be at the top 3 skills, I would probably say no. I would say budget, decision making, and other things essential, more essential. Communication, would I attribute it to the top 3? It is an eye-opener to realize it. The second thing that was an eye-opening for all of us is that it's also at the top 3 of missing skills from the people they recruit. This is for us to digest. This isn't just something they aspire at McKinsey. This is a hard to digest survey that they did globally. The second thing I think we need, I'd like to inspire us further into the conversation as we jump into our first conversation of the fit, flat, and fast example, just as we did with the Amazon Prime in the previous conversation, is something which I, as a history buff, I read recently when I read about Christopher Columbus, that figure that some people suddenly feel discomfort with. I want to mention something about him which I learned, which I think reminds me something we do at best. More than 500 years later, everything Christopher Columbus saw and did, he documented into a log. He met people who spoke a language he didn't speak. He came from Spain. He reported to a queen and a king. Most of the things meant things he didn't understand. He wrote it into a log. The lens that he snapped, some would say, acquired, there were no deeds. The things he wrote into the log were the modern deeds, if you want, into the American land. So this log of his is way more important than most of us realize. When we train today best students, we train them on engineering notebook. They assume endless amount of information throughout this massive program. Many of the things they assume, they probably don't understand. We train them systematically. Write it down. What does this writing down do to you here? Isn't just communicating with a software or with a piece of paper. It is doing way more, because when you write it, you might see something and say, wait a minute, I have this brilliant idea. Is it just communication, or is it much more? I know that the listeners and viewers will say, I know what it does. It's the beginning of the disruption. And that's the question we asked at the beginning. Is communication a buffer, a mean, or is it the beginning of something much bigger? That's the essence of the conversation today. And now let's go to the first example, which you asked about. Sorry for the long introduction. I think it's to prepare us to digest that communication isn't just the mastery of Carl Wolfenden and few more. It's something that many more own.
Yeah.
And that's another hint.
Yeah, no. I think you have to put it into context, and what you just did there was set it up for, as you say, the example that you're about to give.
So, a very fine woman from Cincinnati, Ohio, few years ago, the lead scientist of Procter & Gamble, going on maternity leave with her twin daughters, had this crazy idea. Wouldn't it be nice if my company, she thought, Sarah Giovanni, wouldn't it be nice if when we put this thing on the tush, it would be organic? In all reality, she's on maternity leave. What can she do in such a situation? Not really much. But Sarah Giovanni didn't stay with just a great idea of developing an organic product for P&G. Slowly but surely, as the lead scientist, she developed through her communication skills and her knowledge of STEM, a small group from home while on maternity leave. This is pre-COVID, of just as in the example of Amazon Prime, of the Amazon Prime starting from a small group. Here in P&G, Sarah built the group of 18 people, consisting of the logistics, the research, the packaging, every piece of the puzzle that she needed, because she had the communication capacity that she needed. To make a long story short, for maternity leave, she kicked in $100 million product right at the beginning. So this tiny thing called communication didn't just end with a crazy idea. It delivered to the amazement of the executives at P&G something that nobody saw coming. So I come back to the question, is it just a buffer, a mean, or is it something way on the level of entrepreneurship, the innovation itself? Is it the talent of Sarah Giovanni? Or is it a masterful skill that once you hold it, you're able to deliver something which is hard for us to comprehend? When the executive of P&G was interviewed, he was almost speechless to explain what Sarah delivered.
Yeah, I mean,
example.
No, I mean, so I'm listening to what you just said there, and I'm sort of digesting it and trying to understand how that happened. Because I tell you what, I mean, I meet a lot of people that have a great idea, but if they can't articulate it and communicate it, then how many millions and millions of dollars are missed by organizations, by somebody that has got the foresight, the idea, the experience, etc., and they just can't communicate the value of that idea to the executive team. And so my question is, can an organization train its individuals to be better communicators? Well, what is the answer to that?
So I think it goes really into how we do it. I think the example I would give you is how we do it at best. I'll give you one of the 4 examples, however many we can fit into one conversation about communication, because it can be a whole series of conversations. So one way to train it, which I have seen, I've been part of, and I've given, is to sit in a classroom and talk about, in a training, how communication works. It's nice, it's fine, or to watch videos about communication, but it doesn't really rewire you into how communication is best achieved. The way we do it is, for example, we put in front of our teams, our many hundreds of teams across the country, a challenge, a task. We ask them to put an exhibit booth, a comprehensive, complex exhibit booth. In order to put an exhibit booth, for example, on the electric grid, on mining, on construction and demolition, in order to do that, they've got to go and do a research. They've got to do a buildup of the exhibit booth. They've got to do many pieces, which requires them to communicate among themselves, to communicate with the world. They've got eventually to communicate with audience, judges, and many others who will come and interview them. They've got to go through the grind of many types of communication. They've got to see what works for different people, how to improve themselves again and again and again, and refine it. How to communicate in writing and put signs on the walls of the exhibit booth, how to record text and put screens on the exhibit booth, how to produce a video for the exhibit booth, and on and on and on. This grind, if you will, this enables them to learn and relearn communication skills. It is with mentors who will give them constantly feedback, but it isn't in the traditional way of a trainer in a frontal classroom who will stand and lecture. It's in a way that the learner learns through experience and identify the skin of communication. What fits me in my style best? We'll see through a few examples, the next two examples, that that communication isn't one formula that fits everybody. The next two examples are such that they go further into extremes where the more the talent is in place, the more the individuals need to identify their own skin, and where you shouldn't impose one formula.
I think one of the things I'm a big proponent of project-based learning, and project-based sort of, experience. I've just gone through a situation. We just launched a new solution with one of my companies, XLA Solutions it is. And we were building the website. And I love to tamper. I love to tinker around, and I go in and I look at things. I say, what am I trying to communicate here? And I had to think, because we wanted to put all the different elements. Like you said, it's not just about the writing. The copy is there. You've got the information. You've written that down. But now, how am I going to present that to you? Am I going to do it via video? I want the person, when they go into the experience, whatever it is, to have flow. And there's a whole philosophy around flow. You need to have somebody come in, and you need to have them, you take them through these stages of what you want to take them to, knowing what the end is. Where the end wants to be, but you need to understand that you start at the end. What is the end game? And then you lead the person through. And that could be, as you say, through communication via video, audio,
Absolutely.
visual, etc. But you're wanting them to go. But it was a project-based piece, and I was like, okay, this is how I want people to feel as they come into this. So, what are these other examples that you have that maybe look into that?
And again, you've inspired me into something that I think I mentioned to you in the past. The first company that was sold in Pittsburgh for $1 billion and
Yes.
above, the engineer in the company to the CEO insisted on drawing how to improve the largest machine in the corporation on a napkin. Think what would have happened if the CEO would have said, no, stop, don't do it on a napkin. I want you to come to the conference room and do it to the entire executive in a big whiteboard and do it on a whiteboard. The brilliancy of both in this situation is that the executive didn't do that. Once the employee said, I want to draw it to you on a napkin, the executive sat with him and shut his mouth and watched the employee draw the brilliant formula on a napkin. This napkin delivered the $1 billion.
Yeah.
Communication isn't one formula that fits everybody. It cannot be trained in a classroom. Everyone will find their own skin, and the training, the way we have to do it, enables and empowers. The second example is what I call, since it happened, Wonder Jan, like Wonder Woman. I was in the middle of a project, which is a multi-million-dollar project. And in that time of the project, we were, each of us executives, on the way to sign the contract. In different parts of the world, most of us in motion. To back for a second, in the process of preparing for that moment of going to sign the contract with that government, we kept updating the team. What's going on, how things are moving, kept updating, explaining, full transparency. Suddenly, in that critical moment that we were all traveling, a piece of the puzzle cracked. Somewhere in New York, documents that were supposed to be released from an embassy, we were informed that they were delayed for 24 hours. This delay would have caused a ripple effect that would have caused the contract not to be signed in time. All of us who were traveling were basically in different places. The contract would either be canceled, postponed, but we would all come to that foreign country not being able to do anything. Waste of time, waste of huge sums of money of travel. A team member called Jen communicated to all of us and said, you keep traveling to the destination. I'm taking an executive credit card. I'm traveling to New York. I'll wait next to the embassy. There's a 50-50 chance that if I wait next to the embassy and communicate to the embassy and the people inside how urgent it is and how significant it is that they release the documents in time, I'll get it out. The other 50 is that what's about to happen, disaster will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Don't pull back, she said to us, a junior team member. Keep going. She took the credit card. She went to the airport. She bought a one-way ticket, which was hundreds of dollars. But remember what the other risk was. She waited next to the embassy. She managed to get the documents out. She traveled at night. She got the documents to the last person who was able to travel to that foreign destination. And she miraculously was able to rescue this multi-million-dollar contract. Wonder Jane.
Yes.
A team member with communication skills and ability to execute out of nowhere. Whether we trained her formally, I don't think so. I don't think we had in mind that a team member will suddenly pull everything. It's truly a Wonder Woman story.
Well, the thing that I'm hearing, there's the three examples that you've given there, okay, and there's a common thread that I'm seeing here, okay. No man is an island,
Totally.
okay, and that's a well-known saying, and the thing is that you can't work in a vacuum, and you have to have team members around you that can communicate with each other, and they've all got their own little disciplines. And this is what I love about BEST. You teach all these different disciplines over a period of time. These students, these wonderful, bright, future looking students are coming in, and you're putting them into different disciplines, and they learn that you've got to work as a team. And we started that off right at the beginning. When I first talked to you, you said, nobody can you can't just say, I'm the best. My idea is the best, because you need to have that shared within the whole team. And so every one of those examples you just gave has an example of you bring a people together who have different skill sets, but are able to communicate. And then if you think about it, you've got all these silos of communication, but you lock them together. These atoms are coming together, and then all of a sudden you've got a bigger message and a bigger idea. And that's what I think I want to take away from this, is that communication is yes, it's an individual skill that you have to train and learn, and you have to teach, but you have to put it in a project-based environment, and then you have other people come along. So don't do everything on your own. Embrace other people, and the other thing you said was the executive kept his mouth shut and listened. And sometimes people in business who are at an executive level, sometimes they don't listen. Yeah. They go, oh no, that we've already gone down this path. Let the person talk. At least give them their thoughts and their ideas. We're kind of coming up to the end of our segment, because we've been going for a long time here, and I think as you mentioned earlier on in the conversation, there's lots more that we can really explore. I know that we're going to be having a creativity conversation. Yes. with your friend Shlomo. So I'm going to literally, I'm excited about getting the two of you on talking about creativity, because communication, creativity, I think they do connect. But in summary, Michael, I always like to have you have the last word, because I talk a lot, as you know. But in summary, what do you want the listeners and the viewers to take away from this?
I think I leave a conversation about communication wondering whether, as we began this journey, whether this is really a technology, a mean, a training skill, or this is the entrepreneurial substance. And I know we sometimes find ourselves in a fierce argument that communication sometimes shapes the political environment arguments, such as this one, and we just come out of one. I want to stay away from arguments like that, but it certainly demonstrates how communication is significant. In the innovation entrepreneurial place, I do encourage us to elevate communication as high as putting it equal to the entrepreneurial substance, to the spice itself. I think making it there, putting it as high as the idea itself, isn't as an exaggeration. I heard this morning a young man who was fully embraced in talking about voice over internet. His brilliancy is the way he articulates it. I couldn't separate between the voice over internet, a 26-year-old young man. You cannot separate the entrepreneurial brilliancy and the way he communicates it. It's all one. That's the essence where I would like our viewers and listeners to graduate from a conversation as this one about communication.
Well, Michael, as always, thank you for joining me on this segment, because I can't emphasize enough, because we're a communication channel, at the end of the day, business class news. We
and
want to, I'll appreciate it. But we want to communicate. And so I see out there, I've talked about it before, that people are struggling with embracing what is communication. They think that just a 30-second blip is going to be enough to communicate. It's not. You have to have that whole picture. And I want to be able to instill in everybody that's listening to this and watching this to really go out and see what Best Robotics are doing with your projects, etc., and use that as an example. Because at the end of the day, if we can't communicate, who's going to listen to something that's not communicated properly? And some people say, who listens to your show, my show? But hey, I know that we have a lot of listeners out there, and they're very interested in this subject. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining me today, and I can't wait to get Shlomo on and yourself to talk about creativity and what impact that has on the future. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Carl. Wonderful to be with you as always.
Of course, that was Michael Steiner, Executive Director of Best Robotics. Hey, we're going to actually put on innovate5.com the whole series of these. I mean, the conversation is just going to go on. I think it's going to be the Michael and Carl show going forward. I mean, that's what it needs to be, because, as I say, I have so much fun. And it locks into a lot of the things that we talk about and write about on Business Class News. So, as always, thanks for joining me this morning, joining us, Michael and I. And, as always, what we say is keep safe, have some fun, make some money, because, hey, it's business class news out there, but go and have some fun, but be safe out there. Till the next time, goodbye.